Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Sleepwalker from 2017. So, I think my main attraction to this movie is kind of what I've really been eventually seeing at some point or another. I had reviewed a movie called Coma. I've gone on and reviewed kind of like the Hayden Christensen movie Awake. And like I've kind of seen a lot of these kind of like sleep films where we're trying to understand and define people's dreams and inceptions and demonics and all these kinds of movies that are kind of done in a very fascinating or interesting way. And so I went on and I decided to like, hey, let's see what this movie has to provide for me. And so immediately for Sleepwalker, I would have to say that this kind of comes off as like the show Awake from 2012, or this kind of comes off as like The Father. That, of course, is the Anthony Hopkins movie where the guy has dementia. Uh, but, like, this movie doesn't deal with dementia. It kind of deals with this person that is really never sure when they're really awake. It's kind of one of those films where this girl goes in and out of consciousness, and every time she is to seemingly wake up, she's in a different world trying to understand what's really going on. Desperately trying to avoid going to sleep because of course she doesn't know where she's going to wake up and what's really going to happen, how the world is drastically going to change, and so on and so forth. So it just becomes a very confusing or complex movie that kind of has like I had seen this anime called Death Parade, and it kind of has at the end of the episode, every single episode kind of ends the same. And so, really, with this movie, it does kind of have like a normal ending of any Death Parade episode. And so, like, that's like, there's so many confusing things about this movie, there's so many interesting things about this film. The one I think really big thing about this is one, this movie's conveniently on Hulu, and two, this movie's only an hour and 25 minutes. So, really, if you're just like, what the is going on with this movie, it's not a long, stretched out film. So, plus, I really did enjoy the fact we have Armitage upon this movie, who of course is to have been in the movie Space Sweepers, and but more notably, of course, like The Hobbit and stuff along those lines. So it's kind of interesting to just bizarrely go on and watch a movie that's coincidentally with a actor of which that I've just seen him in Space Sweepers recently. But anyways, so but everyone in this cast, one way or another, like I do know them from somewhere, and so it's kind of cool to have one of those kinds of movies. Just go on to like, oh yeah, I know that guy from like Dawn of the Dead, or I know that guy from The Sixth Sense, or I know that guy from, or this girl from this movie, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of really fun. So, so what is this about? So, considering this movie is to be called Sleepwalkers, we have a character named Sarah Foster or Sarah Wells. You'll know that because life gets really confusing when we get into these dream states. Sarah, whoever she is to go on and continue to start sleepwalking. So much so that she has to go on and seek therapy and certain sleep treatments and trying to figure out what the cause of this all is. And so all of a sudden, while Sarah is going into these experimental sleeps, Sarah all of a sudden is to wake up in two different lives. And this is almost kind of like the Mandela effect, where we just find out that Sarah all of a sudden is a completely different person with a completely different best friend in some alternate world. and like they really don't perfectly tell us which is the dream world and which is the real world. It's very murky. uh, but we also have a story where Sarah is to be consistently tormented or haunted by this guy named Warren, who is, of course, being played by Haley Joel Osment. A lot of people will know him from like The Sixth Sense. So Warren, of course, is to be this kind of Freddy Krueger-esque like character that consistently goes on and is torturing this woman with phone calls and putting bags consistently over her head to suffocate her. And in the supposed real world, we're not quite sure, these people are, of course, telling her it's like, well, suffocation might mean that you might like have problems breathing while you're sleeping, so that might make a lot of sense. So yeah, so it seems that we go further and further into this movie, and it seems that Sarah is to not realize which world is really real of hers. But then we going to have a solution at the end of this movie, which kind of is to negate the answer of whether Sarah is to be dreaming or not dreaming, what's real, what's not real. Everything at the end of this movie just goes on as like, well, like it doesn't matter anymore. Now we have this other kind of thing that's going on with this character to finish up this film, and then Sarah is to realize what all's really going on. And so yeah, so like I don't mean to like overly seem like I'm spoiling this movie, but eventually you'll figure it out as the way of which that I talk about it or I go on. There's a lot of moving parts in this movie. Again, is somewhat confusing. So if there's a lot of stuff that I probably forget about, or if there's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of like not saying in the perfect form of this movie, there's probably a reason, because there's just a lot of just confusion upon this film. So I would have to say that this is a interesting movie, and that normally falls between like very middle of the road kind of film. It's interesting. It's like only an hour and 25 minutes. So for a lot of people, I would probably recommend a number of other kind of like sleep movies, but or probably like the Stephen King movie Sleepwalkers. So a lot of people are like, oh, I thought this was like Sleepwalkers. Oh, this isn't it. Nah, it's a whole plural of a name of a whatever. But anyways, so yeah. So let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into this thing that is to be dubbed spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time again to spoof this movie. So Sarah Foster is to be walking down this road in her nightie, and all of a sudden these two police officers are noticing that she's sleepwalking. They, of course, go on and they're flashing lights into this girl's eyes, and she, of course, to wake up realizing that I guess she had sleepwalked. So they bring her home. Sarah then goes on and is to talk to her doctor, who is Elaine Cooper, and mention it's like, well, yeah, like I fell asleep again and I sleptwalked. And so Dr. Cooper is asking Sarah, it's like, well, why didn't you just have like a lock on your door? And Sarah's like, well, I guess my sleeping self like unlocked the door. It's like, so yeah, that's kind of interesting, because so probably no matter what this girl probably does, like she's probably not going to be able to avoid not sleepwalking as long as her other self wants to do it. So yeah, because it's like, well, why not just like cuff yourself to a bed? Like you would have to like wake up and figure out like how you're going to easily uncuff yourself every morning. It would be kind of like, but let me know if people do go on and sleepwalk and like and have their own kind of technique or whatever, because maybe you are a sleepwalker for whatever reason. So Sarah is talking to this doctor, and so after this whole appointment, Dr. Cooper is to recommend that Sarah should go on and see this sleep doctor and have them possibly analyze why exactly she's having problems sleeping. So Sarah goes on and is like, okay, I'll go and do that. Like that sounds interesting. So Sarah's going on with Dawn to this funeral because at one point Sarah was to have this boyfriend or husband that was this writer, and he, sadly enough, supposedly in the beginning of this movie, took his own life because this movie tends to adjust frequently to where a lot of people would go on and be like, what is going on? Wait a minute, like, what's happening now? To where you kind of have to, like, there's like subtle differences of between one world and the other, and it really just starts to get jumbled and confused, and just because, like, it just ends up being that way. So Sarah goes on with Dawn to go to this funeral, or to go to this grave of a lover of hers, and so Sarah is to go on and notice that there's another guy who is also uh, at a funeral of his own, and that, of course, to be Dr. Scott White. So Sarah is trying to figure out, like, well, like, how to move on. And so Dawn is just like, well, like, just imagine you're going to find some other guy, and that, like, he's single and everything's going to work out, and maybe you can dream about him. So Sarah's like, well, like, that's a good idea. So Sarah goes to this sleep clinic for them to want to have multiple days with this girl to assess things. So Sarah coincidentally goes on to this place and is to bump into Scott White yet again. How convenient. So Sarah goes and it's realized that, like, Scott White is kind of in and out of this room, and so Sarah goes on and tries to get some sleep, and is to kind of wake up supposedly in the middle of the night, or is to just kind of like have problems sleeping, and she wanted to call for anyone to come in there, and Dr. Scott White comes in. He's like, wait, what's wrong? She's like, yeah, I just don't think I'm probably going to be able to sleep. And so both of them start talking, and so Dr. Scott White is mentioning that he isn't married, he just went to a funeral of some student of his, yada, yada, yada. So Sarah was to mention that she was having these dreams that were to deal with some man chasing after her, consistently torturing her, like I said before, through phones and gags and whatever. So Sarah then goes into possibly this other world at some point, and so Sarah is going to class, and we have this teacher who is talking about love and how love is just a a desperate attempt of kind of like love could almost be considered as like a drug of sorts, that everybody's just kind of like chasing after like a adrenaline kind of equivalent of drug. And so we at some points we at some point have it where the teacher is kind of asking Sarah Wells about something, and Sarah's like, "Well, my name is Sarah Foster," and the teacher's like, "Well, hey, whatever you think that your name really is," and Sarah's like, "No, my name is like Sarah Foster," and then like, "No, your name is Sarah Wells." She's like, "Okay." So all of a sudden she goes on, she looks for her ID, and she goes on and asks her best friend what her name is, and her name is Sarah Wells. And she's like, huh? Like, how is it that I had forgotten what my name is? Like, this doesn't make sense. And here's further down the rabbit hole of which that we go. So, within this story, we start to get Sarah, who has a different best friend, uh, who, of course, I believe is actually Nicole. And so, like, Sarah is living completely two different lives, and she's trying to put this all together, and it's getting jumbled and confused. To the point of when Sarah Wells is going on and wanting to talk to her doctor, Elaine Cooper. Cooper has never heard of this woman. Was like, nope, sorry, never heard of you. And like I've never like we've never talked. And Sarah's like, wait a minute, like 3 days ago, like we had an appointment together, and Dr. Cooper's like, no. So and we get more and more just utter confusion in this story. So Sarah goes on and is consistently leaning on Dr. Scott White, and is trying to figure out what's going on, trying to put the pieces together, consistently at points needing to break into certain areas and find a thing of clothes, because usually she's walking around in some nightie for half of this movie. And she goes on and she's like having to adjust these clothes that are consistently like the skirts don't fit her, so she has to like makeshift this belt for her to go on and be able to like wear these dresses consistently. So Sarah goes on and is at some points being haunted by Warren, who is the Freddy Krueger like character, consistently calling her, saying that he's going to come after her. And so we never have Sarah where she's going to be convincing to just like, well, come and get me, mother. There's never really that moment. Warren just kind of shows up at some points chasing after her, or finds her in her home somewhere, and is to go on and try to consistently attack her. And so numerous times we, of course, call the police on this guy, so on and so forth. Or really, we just have Scott White kind of show up and want to help Sarah at some points in this adventure. So, because we have Sarah that is to go out of her way to find out where Scott White lives, and is desperately trying to like need help at this point, just going on and like, yeah, I don't know who I am, like I'm so confused, I'm so disoriented, like somebody's telling me that that I'm Sarah Foster, and somebody's telling me that I'm Sarah Wells. I don't know who I am, I don't know what I am. Everybody's always confused every time I talk. to this lady. She doesn't know who I am. So, like, Scott White is like going, whoa, 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 like, hold it. Like, I'll go on and I'll make an appointment for you to see uh, this, like, Elaine Cooper, and, like, everything will be okay. So, Scott White decides that he's going to take an interest in this girl, um, because, like, it's not only just, like, he, uh, it's not just like, well, I want to save a patient. It's just that he really likes this girl, and, like, he really wants to help her. Like, she's really confused. So Sarah goes on and is to consistently be threatened by Warren, be followed by him. And so finally, we have at one point where Sarah is to be calling or talking to these police officers, and the police officer is saying that this girl had filed a report about a woman who was following her. And Sarah's like, wait a minute, like, I didn't fill that out. Like, we also had Dr. Kozlov that is also saying that this girl was having dreams about a woman chasing after her. And Sarah's like, wait a minute, that's not me. And she starts to write her signature and realizes that the lettering is the exact same. And she's like, oh my God. So it gets to the point of escalation here where they just want to commit this woman because she's crazy. She's obviously crazy. She's breaking into people's windows uh, and she's going into two different worlds where the window isn't broken, and then there's another world where the window's broken, and it's she's crazy. She has to identify which world is different, uh, and so they finally commit her, and Sarah is kind of like kicking and screaming her way into being committed, because she's asking, it's like, well, hey, like, when can I leave? And the doctor is just like, well, like, we'll decide that. And she's like, no, but maybe I have to leave. It's like, well, too bad, because you're crazy. Like, and they put her in there, and she's trying to, like, get away from the guards. They're grabbing onto her. And so all of a sudden we have Scott White going and talking to Elaine Cooper, and all of a sudden he's talking to her and he realizes that Elaine has no clue what Scott White is talking about. She's like, wait a minute, like, Sarah Wells? I don't know a Sarah Wells. And Scott White's like, what are you talking about? We just saw this woman. And Dr. Cooper's like, I don't, like, I can look through my files. I don't know what Sarah Wells. And Scott White is like, oh my God, like, this is happening to me now. So Scott White goes all the way back to this hospital and is to get this woman released, so much so that he's going to unhook her himself and drag her out of this hospital, because he realizes that possibly both of them are in this same bubble together. So now we're just getting close to the big reveal of things. After we go on and have both Sarah Wells and Scott White in this room together, and Warren attacks Sarah yet again, after we find out that, I guess, Warren was to be a big fan of Sarah's husband's books. So much so that I guess this guy, like, took the books far too seriously and was maybe this guy's stalker, possibly. But we also have a story, oddly, where Sarah's husband was having an affair on her because her husband, Jonathan, was kind of maybe swept up in the fame of things, and it seems like a lot of women were to have liked his books. And so all of a sudden, Sarah is to kind of come home one day to this affair. And then so she walks off. So, if that's not goofy enough. So, Warren attacks Sarah. Scott White comes in and helps uh, Sarah eventually take down Warren. They arrest Warren, and it seems like this guy has gone on and done this once before. So now all of a sudden we have it where Sarah is consistently going into this woman's bedroom, this random woman's bedroom, consistently. To where this girl is consistently saying, "Go away," like just go away, please stop. So we also have a moment where Sarah is going into the sleep clinic where all of a sudden there's a brand new different Dr. Scott White, and there's another Sarah Wells that isn't this Sarah Wells. And if that's not confusing enough, so, but then she goes back to her dream, Sarah does, back to her own Scott White, and she's like, oh, like for some reason, I guess I was in this other world where, like, you weren't you, and I wasn't me, and this and that. So, because there's a reason for that. Because at the end of all this, this kind of comes off as like the Nicole Kidman movie, The Others, where we find out that the Sarah Foster, Sarah Wells character here is to actually go by Anna. Because we find out that the real Sarah Wells is being haunted by the affair of both Jonathan and Anna. And Anna is to, who's Sarah Wells and Sarah Foster is to realize this, and she is to, like, remember now that Dr. Scott White, her love, is actually Jonathan. And Anna had shot Jonathan and then shot herself. And so both of them, I guess, are now possibly in this kind of limbo or purgatory, or just kind of like maybe they're ghosts. And so it seems that these two characters are to need to go on and try to figure this out and figure out a way out and possibly figure out how to eventually fade away into the nothingness, because that's what technically they are, because both Scott White and Anna, who is technically Jonathan and Anna, are both dead. So there's a whole video of this woman explaining, Sarah Wells explaining what all is going on and what it all happened. And so Anna puts the pieces together. So, yeah, a little bit of a confusing movie into the point of me not remembering every bit and piece and whatever. But I've said that over and over again. But, so yeah, like this was going to be a really tough one to try to remember everything. And plus also remember all the goofy, weird pieces. that get put in place throughout this film. But yeah, with that said, I think that is roughly the Sleepwalker film. Let me know if you went out of your way to watch this film after I was to go on and review it. Just like, oh, I've never heard of this movie before. Go on and check this out and probably get confused as much as I will. And a lot of people will probably go on and easily know the differences or the subtle things. Some people know which one is the real world, which one is the dream world, and so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, like figure out this whole movie and let me know about it because at the end of the day, I'm going to say that this movie is reviewed. Just a jumbled mess of a film. But at the end of the day, it was just kind of like okay, like this is like alright. It's kind of like Memento, where supposedly the ending of the movie is at the beginning and the beginning of the movie is at the end, and you're just like, wait a minute, what's all going on here? It's consistently that movie where it's like, wait, what? So, with that said, I am going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.